Some men ruin their lives with a bad investment. Others do it with a careless affair. Matteo ruined his over a piece of tarnished metal. He thought mocking his wife's cheap ring would make him look like a big shot. He didn't know he was insulting the wealthiest bloodline in Europe. Matteo Trent could tell you the retail price of a stranger's shoes from 20 feet away. It was a reflex. He categorized the world into assets and liabilities, and for the last 5 years, he had been desperately trying to move himself into the former category. He stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling mirror in their rented Manhattan apartment, adjusting the cuffs of his Tom Ford suit. He shot his cuffs out exactly half an inch beyond his jacket sleeves, making sure the face of his Rolex Submariner caught the ambient light of the bedroom. The watch was real. The suit was real. The apartment, however, was heavily leveraged, bleeding a devastating portion of his monthly income from his mid-level firm. But in wealth management, you had to look like a rainmaker before anyone let you touch the rain. Elena sat on the edge of the bed behind him. She was folding laundry. She wore a pair of faded Levi's and an oversized gray cashmere sweater that had begun to pill under the arms. "Do you have to wear that tonight?" Matteo asked, his eyes meeting hers in the mirror. Elena paused, holding a pair of his socks. "Wear what? The sweater? I'm just folding clothes, Matteo. I'll change before Thomas and Evelyn arrive." "Good." Matteo turned around, running a hand through his aggressively pomaded hair. "Because tonight is the night. Pierce is looking to allocate $50 million into a boutique fund. If I can get him to anchor my new firm, 3 other guys at his country club will follow suit. I need this to be perfect. The food, the wine, the presentation." "The presentation of us," Elena said quietly. It wasn't a question. "Exactly." He pointed a finger at her, missing the exhaustion in her voice entirely. "Optics, Elena. People invest in winners. They need to walk in here and smell success." Elena looked down at her hands, her left hand resting on the white cotton of the bed sheets. On her ring finger sat a thick, slightly uneven silver band. Set into it was a dull, yellowish stone with an antique, asymmetrical cut. It didn't sparkle. It didn't catch the light. It looked like a piece of costume jewelry dug out of a thrift store bin. When Matteo proposed 3 years ago, he hadn't had a ring. He'd been drowning in student debt, working 80-hour weeks as an analyst. Elena had smiled, reached into her purse, and pulled out this ring. "My grandmother gave it to me," she had told him. "I don't need a diamond from a store. Use the money to pay down your loans. This is all I want." Matteo had been relieved at the time. Now, it was an embarrassment. "Are you going to wear the ring?" he asked, his tone dropping an octave. Elena stiffened. "It's my wedding ring, Matteo. Yes, I'm going to wear it. Can't you just take it off? Just for a few hours. I bought you that nice David Yurman bracelet for your birthday. Wear that. It draws the eye. That ring just looks like you fished it out of a cereal box. It drags down the whole aesthetic." Elena's thumb rubbed the side of the dull stone. She didn't tell him that the silver band was actually pure, unrhodium-plated platinum, forged before the First World War. She didn't tell him that the dull, yellowish stone was an uncut, internally flawless Golconda diamond, mined in India in the 17th century, and passed down through the matriarchs of the Bishop family for 4 generations. It had sat on the hands of women who funded railroads, bought politicians, and shaped the industrial landscape of the Western Hemisphere. She had kept her family a secret. The Bishops didn't appear in Forbes. They didn't do interviews. They operated through trusts, holding companies and proxies. When Elena met Matteo, she was a 24-year-old art history student who just wanted to be loved for herself, not her trust fund. Matteo had been fiercely ambitious, funny, and seemingly grounded. She thought she was marrying a man who wanted to build a life together. Instead, she watched him morph into a walking spreadsheet. "It stays on, Matteo," Elena said. Her voice lacked anger. It was just hollow. Matteo sighed, checking his watch. "Fine, whatever. Just keep your hands in your lap when Evelyn is talking. The woman has an eye like a hawk. I don't need her thinking I can't afford to take care of my own wife." He walked out of the bedroom to check the caterers in the kitchen. Elena sat alone in the quiet. She looked at the ring. Her grandmother, a woman who could freeze a boardroom of oil barons with a single glance, had told her exactly what the ring was for. "Men will look at it and see a dirty piece of glass," her grandmother had rasped from her deathbed in Geneva. "Because small men only understand the value of things that come with a price tag. It will tell you exactly who you are dealing with." Elena took a deep breath, stood up, and went to the closet to find a dress that wouldn't embarrass her husband. Thomas and Evelyn Pierce arrived 15 minutes late, which in their tax bracket was exactly on time. Thomas was a large, florid man who had inherited a commercial real estate empire and managed to not bankrupt it, a fact he considered a stroke of personal genius. Evelyn was sharp angles, Botox, and a tennis tan. She wore a diamond tennis necklace that cast a blinding glare across the dining room table. The dinner went exactly as Matteo had choreographed. The private chef he couldn't afford served seared scallops and a perfectly rare duck breast. Matteo poured a $200 bottle of Barolo, laughing a little too loudly at Thomas's mediocre jokes about golf and tax loopholes. Elena sat across from Evelyn, eating quietly. She played her part perfectly, the supportive, elegant, muted wife. She asked Evelyn about her philanthropic board positions. She agreed with Thomas about the state of the city. She kept her left hand resting gently by her plate. By the time dessert, a dark chocolate fondant, was served, Matteo was glowing. Thomas was nodding along to Matteo's pitch about market inefficiencies in the tech sector. "I like your drive, Matteo," Thomas said, swirling the last of his wine. "You've got a good head for the game, hungry. I like hungry guys. The guys at the big banks, they're fat. They don't fight for the yield." "I don't sleep, Tom," Matteo grinned, leaning forward. "I eat, breathe, and bleed my clients' portfolios. You put your capital with me, it's not going into a passive index. It's going to work. We'll talk numbers on Monday," Thomas said, clapping his hand on the table. "I think we can do some business." Matteo practically vibrated in his chair. He looked at Elena, a triumphant, self-satisfied smirk on his face. "I did it," the look said. "I won." Evelyn, perhaps sensing the shift in attention, placed her fork down and leaned across the table toward Elena. "Elena, dear," Evelyn said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "I've been meaning to ask you all night. I simply cannot take my eyes off it." Matteo froze. Evelyn pointed a manicured finger at Elena's left hand. "That fascinating piece you're wearing. I'm something of a jewelry collector, and I must confess I am stumped. Is it modern art?" Elena looked down at her grandmother's ring. "It's an antique," she said simply. "A family piece." Evelyn let out a breathy, condescending laugh. "Oh, I see. Very bohemian. It almost looks like brass. And that stone. What is that? A piece of raw quartz? It's very brave of you to wear something so unconventional. Usually, a woman in your husband's position would demand at least 3 carats of VVS. Thomas chuckled, a low, rumbling sound. Evelyn, leave the poor girl alone. Not everyone cares about the shiny stuff. Matteo's face flushed a deep, ugly red. The optics were unraveling. Evelyn Pierce was looking at his wife like she was a charity case. The $50 million felt suddenly fragile, hanging in the balance of a social faux pas. The instinct to survive, to align himself with the power in the room, kicked in. "Oh, don't mind that old thing, Evelyn," Matteo laughed. It was a harsh, nervous sound. Elena slowly turned her head to look at him. Matteo didn't look back. He kept his eyes glued to Evelyn and Thomas. "I've been begging her to throw it away for years. It's practically a Cracker Jack prize. Some junk her grandmother picked up at a flea market, I think. Leaves a green ring on her finger if she sweats." Thomas threw his head back and laughed loudly. Evelyn smiled, clearly pleased that her judgment had been validated by the husband. "I keep telling her," Matteo continued, warming up to the crowd, throwing his wife under the bus to secure the laughter. "I tell her, Elena, I'm about to launch my own fund. You can't walk around wearing a piece of glass that looks like a high school shop project." But she's stubborn. "I've already got a guy in the diamond district sourcing a proper stone. 5 carats. Flawless. We're upgrading her next month, tossing the fake in the trash where it belongs." The dining room went very still for Elena. The sound of Matteo's desperate, sycophantic laughter seemed to echo from a great distance. She looked at the man she had shared a bed with for 3 years. She saw the sweat on his upper lip. She saw the pathetic eagerness in his eyes to please people he didn't even like. He didn't love her. He loved the idea of her fitting into his portfolio. And when she didn't fit, he devalued her. Elena didn't cry. She didn't shout. A strange glacial calm washed over her. The illusion she had fought so hard to maintain, the dream of a normal middle-class marriage with a man who loved her for her, shattered completely. "Excuse me," Elena said. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the laughter like a scalpel. Thomas and Evelyn stopped chuckling. Matteo finally looked at her, a warning glare flashing in his eyes, silently ordering her not to make a scene. Elena stood up. She smoothly slipped the ring off her finger. She walked around the table and placed the ring precisely in the center of Matteo's dessert plate, right next to the melted chocolate. "You don't have to upgrade me, Matteo," Elena said, her tone deadpan and steady. "And you don't have to throw it in the trash. You can keep it. Consider it my contribution to your new fund." Matteo's jaw tightened. "Elena, sit down. You're embarrassing yourself. Good night, Thomas. Evelyn, thank you for coming." Elena turned her back on the table and walked toward the bedroom. "Elena!" Matteo snapped, his voice sharp with authority. He half stood from his chair. "Get back here." She didn't stop. She walked into the bedroom, pulled her weekend bag from the top of the closet, and began tossing clothes into it. She didn't pack the David Yurman bracelet. She didn't pack the expensive dresses he had bought her. She packed her jeans, her pilled sweaters, and a worn copy of Joan Didion she kept on her nightstand. Matteo burst into the room 2 minutes later, closing the door fiercely behind him. "Are you insane?" he hissed, his face twisted in rage. "Do you know what you just did? You just walked out on Thomas Pierce. He was about to write me a check for $50 million, and you throw a tantrum over a joke?" Elena zipped up the bag, She slung the strap over her shoulder. "It wasn't a joke, Matteo," she said, looking him dead in the eye. "It was an audition, and you passed. You proved exactly who you are." "Where are you going?" he demanded, blocking the doorway. "You're going to go back out there, apologize to Evelyn, and sit down." Elena stared at him. The sheer, overwhelming smallness of the man was suddenly exhausting to look at. "Move, Matteo." "Or what?" he mocked, crossing his arms. "You're going to leave? Where are you going to go, Elena? You make $40,000 a year at the gallery. You can't even afford a hotel room in this city right now. You need me." Elena offered a faint, chilling smile. It was a smile that belonged to her grandmother. "You have absolutely no idea who I am," she whispered. She pushed past him. Matteo was too stunned by the physical contact to stop her. He followed her down the hall, shouting apologies over her shoulder to the Pierces, who were sitting in awkward silence at the dining table. Elena opened the front door, stepped out into the hallway, and let the heavy door slam shut behind her. Matteo stood in the foyer, breathing heavily. He smoothed his tie. He forced a smile back onto his face and returned to the dining room. "Women," Matteo said, chuckling nervously as he picked up his wine glass. "A little too much wine, I think. Very emotional. Anyway, Thomas, about those tech valuations." Thomas looked at the tarnished ring sitting in the chocolate smear on Matteo's plate. He didn't smile. "Yeah," Thomas muttered, suddenly checking his phone. "Look, Matteo, it's getting late. Evelyn has an early morning. We should hit the road." By Monday, Thomas Pierce stopped returning Matteo's calls. But that was only the beginning of the bleeding. Matteo didn't know it yet, but the moment the apartment door clicked shut, his life as he knew it had officially ended. Matteo waited 3 days for Elena to come crawling back. He left her text messages that started as condescending directives and devolved into angry ultimatums. "Stop this childish silent treatment." Then, Thomas pulled out. "You cost me my firm. Get home now." Then finally, "I'm freezing the joint checking account." She didn't reply. The joint account, which held a pathetic $4,000, remained untouched. By Thursday morning, the silence in the apartment had grown suffocating. Matteo's anxiety was manifesting as a tight, hot knot in his chest. His current employer, a mid-tier asset management firm, had caught wind of the botched Pierce deal. His boss had stopped looking him in the eye in the hallway. Matteo's heavily leveraged life required constant forward momentum just to stay afloat. He needed a win. He needed capital. He opened his bedside drawer. Sitting next to his expensive watch collection was the ring. Elena had left it sitting in the chocolate, and he had angrily washed it off in the sink, tossing it into the drawer like a stray paperclip. He picked it up. It felt strangely heavy for its size. The dull, uneven stone mocked him. "Consider it my contribution to your new fund," Matteo scoffed. "Fine," he muttered to the empty room. "Let's see what a flea market fake buys me. Maybe it'll cover my bar tab." He took an early lunch and walked down to the Diamond District on 47th Street. He didn't go to the flashy retail fronts with the aggressive salesman on the sidewalk. He went to a drab, secure building, took the elevator to the 8th floor, and buzzed into the office of Arthur Klein. Arthur was a third-generation appraiser and broker. He was a cynical, quiet man who had seen every iteration of human greed and desperation slide across his felt-lined counter. Matteo had used Arthur twice before to source tennis bracelets for clients' mistresses. "Matteo," Arthur grunted, barely looking up from his ledger. "What are you buying today?" "Selling, actually. Matteo dropped the ring onto the black felt pad between them. It landed with a dull, heavy thud. Wife's junk. Just want to liquidate it for the metal weight. Maybe $50 for the novelty? Arthur sighed, pulling his jeweler's loop from his breast pocket. I don't buy scrap, Matteo. Take it down to the ground floor. Just look at it, Artie. Humor me. Arthur picked up the ring. He didn't even put the loop to his eye at first. He just felt the weight of it. His thumb rubbed the thick, tarnished band. He frowned. He pulled a small bottle of testing acid and a file from a drawer. He made a microscopic scratch on the inside of the band, applied a drop of acid, and watched. Nothing happened. The metal didn't bubble or discolor. Arthur's posture changed. He sat up very straight. He screwed the loop into his right eye and held the ring under the blinding halogen desk lamp. For a long time, the only sound in the small office was the hum of the air conditioner. Matteo checked his Rolex. Well, is it even silver? Arthur didn't answer. His hand, holding the ring, began to tremble. A bead of sweat formed at his temple, catching the harsh light. He rotated the ring, staring deep into the asymmetrical, yellowish stone. He looked like a man who had just found a live grenade in a sandbox. Slowly, Arthur lowered the ring. He placed it back on the black felt. He took the loop out of his eye. His face was entirely devoid of color. Where did you get this? Arthur asked. His voice was a dry rasp. I told you it's my wife's, passed down from her grandmother. It's trash, right? Your wife, Arthur repeated slowly. What is her maiden name? Bishop, Matteo said, crossing his arms. Elena Bishop. Why? Arthur closed his eyes. He let out a long, shaky breath and leaned back in his chair, putting his hands flat on the desk as if to distance himself from the object in front of him. Matteo, Arthur said quietly, do you know what a Golconda diamond is? Sounds like a coffee bean. They were mined in India. The mines were depleted in the 1700s. They are the purest, most internally flawless diamonds ever pulled from the earth. The Hope diamond is a Golconda. The Koh-i-Noor is a Golconda. Arthur pointed a trembling finger at the ring. That is an uncut 22-carat Golconda diamond. The band is pure, unalloyed platinum, poured sometime in the late 19th century. Matteo stared at the jeweler. A cold, prickling sensation began to creep up the back of his neck. Are you insane? It doesn't even shine. Because it's uncut, you absolute fool, Arthur snapped, his professional demeanor evaporating. It's not meant to shine. It's meant to hold wealth. This isn't jewelry, Matteo. This is an artifact. Okay, Matteo swallowed hard, his mind racing. Okay, so what's it worth? $1 million? 2? Arthur let out a harsh, barking laugh. Worth? You can't put a price tag on this because it's not for sale. It will never be for sale. If I put this on the market, Sotheby's would have an aneurysm, and then my shop would be raided by men with very expensive suits and very real guns. What are you talking about? The Bishop family, Arthur leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper. You don't read about them because they pay billions of dollars to remain invisible. They own the land your apartment building sits on. They hold the debt of the bank you work for. And this ring, this is the matriarch's ring. It's a legend in the trade. It disappeared off the grid 20 years ago when old Eleanor Bishop died. Arthur looked at Matteo with a mixture of pity and absolute horror. You didn't marry a woman named Elena, Matteo. You married a bishop. And you brought her ring to a pawn shop. Arthur slid the black felt pad across the desk, pushing the ring back toward Matteo. Take it, put it in your pocket, walk out of my store, never come back. Artie, wait! Get out! Arthur yelled, standing up. I will not be the last man seen holding that ring before you end up at the bottom of the Hudson. Get out of my shop! Matteo stumbled out of the office. The hallway suddenly felt incredibly narrow. The elevator ride down to the street felt like falling. He stood on the crowded sidewalk of 47th Street, the midday sun beating down on his expensive suit. He reached into his pocket. The ring felt like a piece of burning coal against his thigh. He pulled out his phone. His hands were shaking so badly, he dropped it once before dialing Elena's number. It went straight to a sterile, automated voicemail. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. Matteo felt a cold sweat break out across his ribs. He opened his banking app to check the joint account, a desperate, irrational need to see some connection to her. The screen loaded. A red error message popped up. Account not found. Please contact your branch administrator. The bleeding had begun. Wealth is quiet. Ruin is deafening. It took exactly 48 hours for the Bishop family machine to dismantle the life Matteo Trent had spent a decade building. They didn't use thugs. They didn't break his kneecaps. They simply turned off the tap. Friday morning, his keycard flashed a solid, angry red at the office. His boss met him in the lobby with a cardboard box and a terrified expression. 3 institutional clients threatened to pull $2 billion if you're here by noon, Gregory had said, refusing to make eye contact. I don't know who you pissed off, Matteo, but you're radioactive. Get out. By afternoon, his phone was a relentless drumbeat of disaster. His mortgage lender called the loan on his heavily leveraged Manhattan apartment, citing a hidden margin clause triggered by his sudden termination. $2 million was due in 30 days. When he tried to log into his brokerage accounts to liquidate his tech stocks, a red banner declared his assets frozen, pending an internal compliance review. He was drowning. He rushed back to the apartment, desperate to find Elena, but the closet was entirely empty. Someone had come in and scrubbed her existence from the space. The David Yurman bracelet he'd bought her sat alone on the dresser, accompanied by a typed receipt listing its exact resale value. Panic drove him to Chelsea, to the small art gallery where Elena worked. He threw a 20 at a cab driver and scrambled onto the pavement. The gallery was dark. The windows were papered over with brown butcher paper, a neat lease available sign hanging on the locked door. Looking for someone? The voice was smooth, calm, and entirely devoid of affection. Matteo spun around. A black Maybach idled seamlessly at the curb. Standing beside the open rear door was Elena. She wore impeccably cut bespoke jeans and a simple white silk blouse. No logos, just the terrifying invisible wealth that didn't need to shout to be heard. 2 men in dark suits flanked her, looking less like bouncers and more like former intelligence operatives. Matteo's knees hit the concrete. The Tom Ford trousers scraped against the pavement, but he no longer cared about the optics. Elena, he choked out, tears finally spilling over his cheeks. Please, I'm sorry. I was an idiot. I was just stressed. Call them off. Tell whoever is doing this to stop. Elena looked down at him. There was no anger in her eyes. There was only the mild, detached observation you give a stranger who has tripped on the sidewalk. Get up, Matteo, she said softly. You're embarrassing yourself. They took my job, he sobbed, ignoring her command. The bank is taking the apartment. My accounts are frozen. Elena, please. Elena tilted her head. Nobody is doing anything to you, Matteo. We just stopped protecting you. He blinked through his tears. What? My father bought your firm 3 years ago to ensure you were promoted, she said, her tone perfectly conversational. He underwrote your mortgage through a proxy bank so you wouldn't feel emasculated by a cosigner. We padded your portfolio with shell companies. You didn't build a life, Matteo. You lived in a terrarium I bought for you. The truth knocked the wind completely out of him. His swagger, his lectures on hustle, his aggressive ambition. It was all a curated illusion. He wasn't a shark. He was a goldfish swimming in a plastic castle. Why? He whispered, the fight draining into the concrete. Because I loved you, Elena said. I wanted you to feel successful so you could relax and just be a husband. But you never stopped performing. And the moment you thought I didn't fit your aesthetic, you threw me away. She held out her hand. The ring, please. His hands shook violently as he reached into his pocket. He pulled out the heavy tarnished platinum band with the dull Golconda stone and placed it in her palm. It looked exactly where it belonged. What am I supposed to do now? Matteo asked, thoroughly hollowed out. You have exactly what you had the day we met, Elena said, slipping the ring back onto her left hand. Ambition and a lot of debt. I suggest you start applying for junior analyst roles. It's a tough market. She turned and slid into the back of the Maybach. Elena! Matteo screamed, lunging forward. One of the suits stepped smoothly into his path, placing a firm, immovable hand on his chest. Walk away, Mr. Trent. The heavy car door closed with a solid, expensive thud. The engine barely made a sound as the Maybach glided seamlessly into the Manhattan traffic. Matteo knelt on the sidewalk alone. He looked down at his Rolex. The second hand swept cleanly around the dial. It was real. But as he looked closer, the steel suddenly just looked like cold, heavy metal, ticking down the seconds of a life he had completely destroyed. Some people learn the value of loyalty only after they've sold it for cheap change. Matteo traded a priceless life for a fleeting moment of ego, and in the end, he was left with exactly what he paid for: nothing. If this story struck a nerve, hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs a reminder that true value isn't always shiny. Don't forget to subscribe for more deeply human stories, because the best drama is always real life.